Chapter 41. She's my wife. I'll accompany her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 41. She's my wife. I'll accompany her wherever she goes. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. After sending away Du Yuanruo, Pei Qian finally looked at Lin Suisui, who was standing at the side. Madam Lu, since you're the first to discover the sick person, you should naturally take responsibility for this matter. I'm not proficient in medicine, but I know how terrifying this plague is. Since you took the initiative to tell me, can you resolve it? Yes, but I'm afraid I can't help you much. Lin Suisui lowered her eyes. She had experienced many the plague before, so she naturally knew how scary they were. She also knew what to do to minimize the impact and damage. But that was only if people listened to her. Everyone in the refugee camp, from refugees to officials, soldiers, and even me, will listen to your orders. If anyone violates the order or goes against it, I won't let them off easily. In that case, are you willing to accept the order? Pei Qian looked at the little girl standing in front of him. His no longer sounded nonchalant or casual. Instead, he was seriously entrusting her with the task. Lin Suisui took 2 steps back and bowed seriously. Then, she said word by word, I accept the military order. Military orders were like mountains. Lin Suisui knew very well that by accepting this order, she was actually putting her life on the line. If there was any mistake, she definitely wouldn't be able to escape responsibility. However, this wasn't the first time she had received a military order to take over treatment during the plague. The entire camp needs to be divided into 2 isolation areas. One is to accommodate those who have already fallen ill, and the other is to isolate those who have interacted with the patients. I have a prescription here. The herbs on it can be found in the nearby forest. Please arrange for people to go up the mountain to search for these herbs. When they come back, boil them according to the prescription so that all the refugees in the refugee camp will have enough medicine to drink 3 times a day. In addition, please let the doctor come out and screen the refugees in the refugee camp as soon as possible. We'll isolate those refugees who are starting to show symptoms of fever to prevent them from spreading the disease further. Lin Suisui spoke very quickly as she told Pei Qian everything that needed to be prepared. Of course, she also requested for the refugees who had died of illness to be cremated immediately. Not only the remains, but the things that the patients had used also had to be burned. The area used to isolate patients also had to be strictly guarded. Without orders from above, no one was allowed to enter or leave without permission, nor were they allowed to interact with the outside world. All these instructions were quickly arranged in an orderly manner. Although the refugees in the refugee camp were flustered when they found out about this matter, because of the quick intervention of the soldiers, those who caused trouble were quickly suppressed and punished to serve as examples. Although the remaining refugees were afraid, they didn't dare to resist and could only listen to orders obediently. After all, there was still a chance of survival if they listened to orders now, but if they caused trouble again. The corpses of the few people who had just been hung on the wooden rack beside them were still dripping with blood. The soldiers below were handling the matters in the refugee camp, but at this moment, everyone in Pei Qian's main tent was in trouble because of another matter. It was easy to deal with these matters outside, but it wasn't a solution. The most important thing was to quickly find a way to treat the plague. Although Pei Qian had already arranged for someone to send a letter to the nearest city to ask for help, he actually knew very well that unless he went over personally, those local officials probably wouldn't send a single doctor even if everyone here died. Moreover, escorting refugees to the north to settle down had always been closely monitored by the royal court because it involved the livelihood of the people. Now that such a thing had happened, it was hard to guarantee that those old people wouldn't cause trouble. So, what should he do now? I'll go. Lin Suisui walked out of the corner she had been standing in. She was abnormally calm and composed, as if she was just going out for a stroll or a meal. I'll go treat those refugees who are already sick and see if I can find a cure as soon as possible. Lin Suisui wasn't acting on impulse. She had experienced the plague too many times. It wasn't that she hadn't experienced an even more terrifying plague. She understood that at such a time, they were actually fighting for time with Hades. The earlier they found a cure, the earlier this crisis would be resolved. Nonsense. You only know some medical skills. You're not a doctor. Pei Qian subconsciously rejected Lin Suisui's decision. As he scolded Lin Suisui, he didn't forget to turn to look at the medical officers standing at the side. The disdain and killing intent in his eyes were obvious. I didn't expect that there would be you cowardly trash in the entourage this time. Madame Lu does not receive a salary from the imperial court. A mere woman has the courage to enter the plague area to find a way to treat people's illnesses, but you guys, as men, only want to avoid danger and shirk responsibility. I think you guys don't have to be men anymore. Just be castrated. The 4 medical officers were shocked and hurriedly knelt down to beg for mercy. They didn't think that Pei Qian was deliberately scaring them. He was really capable of doing that. Prince, the plague are different. If these medical officials don't have experience in treating the plague, they might not be of much use even if they go. I'll go. I'll record the situation every day and give the report to the medical officers. This way, everyone can adjust the treatment prescription according to the development of the illness. This method is much more efficient than everyone going in. Lin Suisui wasn't pleading for mercy for these trembling medical officials, but the plague was contagious. If it wasn't handled well, the final outcome might be even worse. It was better to let these pedantic doctors, who were good at preaching, deal with some trivial matters regarding the selection of herbs. It was better than them going in and getting infected, and her having to take care of them. Seeing how insistent Lin Suisui was, although Pei Qian was still a little worried, he knew that what she said was reasonable. However, if she really wanted to go to that dangerous place alone. It's too dangerous for you to go in alone. Pei Qian frowned. Although he had relented a little, he still didn't completely let go of his worries. I'll accompany her. Before Pei Qian could finish speaking, he saw Lu Zhe stride in from outside the tent. He stood beside Lin Suisui and said to Pei Qian word by word, "She's my wife. I'll naturally accompany her wherever she goes." Chapter 42. They're about to die. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 42. They're about to die. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Lin Suisui subconsciously wanted to object to Lu Zhe's decision, but compared to Pei Qian, Lu Zhe was much more stubborn regarding this matter. There was no room for negotiation. It was obvious that Pei Qian supported Lu Zhe on this matter. Therefore, in the end, Lin Suisui had no choice but to accept this arrangement. Do you know that it's very dangerous to follow me into the infected area like this? Because she was forced to accept it, when Lin Suisui left to make preparations, she naturally had to nag Lu Zhe. Of course, her motive was very clear. She hoped that Lu Zhe could retreat and change his mind. You're right, but I have no intention of changing my mind. Lu Zhe accompanied Lin Suisui to pack her things. He didn't feel annoyed by her nagging, but amused. Of course, he understood why Lin Suisui was so naggy, but he didn't think that his decision was wrong. The refugees in the plague area most likely already knew about the illness in their bodies. Amidst their despair and madness, there was no telling what they would do. They might not resent the sergeants who had confined them in the plague area. They would only vent all their dissatisfaction and anger on Lin Suisui, who was relatively weaker. Therefore, letting a weak woman like her enter the plague area was no different from sending her to her death. Just tell me what we need to pay attention to. Lu Zhe turned around and looked at Lin Suisui. Before she could start nagging again, he continued to say to her calmly, "If you go in there alone and there's no one to protect you, I'll be worried. Lin Suisui didn't have the chance to persuade Lu Zhe anymore because she had already been surrounded by Mrs. Luo and the others. Mrs. Luo naturally disagreed with Lin Suisui taking the initiative to go to the plague area. She pulled Lin Suisui and advised worriedly, "How can a girl like you take the initiative to get involved in such a thing? Didn't they say that there were a few medical officers coming over this time? Shouldn't those medical officers be the ones to deal with this? It's so dangerous. If anything happens to you, what will happen to your husband? He said he'll go with me." Lin Suisui turned to look at Lu Zhe, who was packing everything up and putting it on the ox cart. Although she had yet to let go of her worries, when she said this to Mrs. Luo, she felt inexplicably touched. "What? Your husband said he would go with you?" Mrs. Luo was dumbfounded when she heard Lin Suisui's words. It was so dangerous to enter the plague area. Others wanted to hide. What was with this couple? If I don't go, what if others bully her? Lu Zhe walked over and happened to hear Mrs. Luo's exclamation. He replied, "Don't worry, it's nothing serious." Seeing that she couldn't dissuade them anymore, Mrs. Luo didn't say anything else to persuade them to stay. She only instructed them to be careful. Lu Zhe drove the ox cart and brought Lin Suisui into the newly designated tent area in the distance. He and Lin Suisui didn't occupy the tent set up for the patients. Instead, they stayed in their ox cart. Pei Qian had sent people over early and built a fence around this area with newly cut tree trunks. There were people patrolling and guarding the area, since they were afraid that someone inside would run out. It was obvious that the wall was still being reinforced, but what attracted the most attention was the row of tall wooden supports that had been erected early on. Lin Suisui was familiar with Pei Qian's style of doing things. With just a glance, she could guess the use of these shelves. Moreover, what surprised Lin Suisui even more was that Pei Qian was actually waiting for them at the entrance of the plague area. "Go in first. I still have something to tell your husband." Seeing Lin Suisui get out of the car and bow to him, Pei Qian only raised his hand to signal her to get up. At the same time, he stopped Lu Zhe, who was beside her. Lin Suisui didn't say anything. Instead, she quickly took out the handkerchief she had just made in a hurry from the ox cart and wrapped it around her mouth and nose. She turned around and nodded at Lu Zhe before turning around and entering the plague area without looking back. On the other hand, Pei Qian didn't delay Lu Zhe for too long. When Lin Suisui entered an empty space in the plague area that was a distance away from those tents, Lu Zhe also chased after her with an ox cart. "Put this on first." Lin Suisui reached out and handed Lu Zhe a handkerchief. Then, she went into the ox cart and took out simple sleeves that she had made at the last minute. She handed them to Lu Zhe and said, "I'm not sure how the plague spreads. I heard that people might get rashes that fester. I think it spreads through contact. In short, we have to try our best to avoid contact with the patient's sores later. We also have to avoid face-to-face contact with them. Some plagues can also be spread between people." Lin Suisui helped Lu Zhe put on gloves and took out a similar set of sleeves to put on. Then, she looked up and smiled at Lu Zhe. "I'll find the solution as soon as possible. Don't worry." Lu Zhe looked at the thin but upright figure walking in front of him and felt a sense of familiarity. This scene gave him a feeling of déjà vu. However, at that time, the figure wasn't running towards these infected patients, but the battlefield. He couldn't confirm it, but... "Don't be anxious." Seeing that Lin Suisui was about to lift the curtain and enter the tent, Lu Zhe didn't have the time to think anymore and quickly chased after her. After the initial screening, it was confirmed that there were about 18 refugees who had symptoms of the plague. There were some who had light symptoms and some who had heavy symptoms, but without exception, they all had some contact with the woman who had died. According to Lin Suisui's previous instructions, these patients were also arranged to be in 5 tents according to the severity of their conditions. The tent she entered first was the one with patients that had relatively mild symptoms. In a short period of time, the 5 refugees living here had already experienced despair. The plague. No one had expected that such a terrifying thing would happen to them one day. When they were sent in, they had argued and cried, but what could they do? There was no point in cursing the woman who had passed the illness to them. They were about to die. Chapter 43. Doctor, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 43. Doctor Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. After Lin Suisui entered the tent, she saw 5 completely lifeless faces and equally hollow eyes. I'm the doctor who came to treat you all. Lin Suisui's voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. Almost as soon as she spoke, she elicited a response from a few people in the tent. They looked like puppets that had snapped back to their senses. A doctor. We can be saved. Among the 5 patients in the room, only the woman closest to the tent snorted mockingly. Everyone knows that if you get the plague, you can only wait for death. How can we be saved? If there's really a way to save us, the people who come to save us should be the medical officers following that Lord. Who do you think you are? The woman pulled her coat as she vented her anger. She was going to die anyway. What else did she have to worry about? Everyone says that there are specialists in every field. Since I received the orders from the higher-ups to come here, it means that I have a certain level of capability and confidence in treating the plague. As for the medical officers you mentioned, I'll feedback the results I obtained after checking your pulse here. Then, everyone will determine the medicine amount together. This way, everyone can split the work and work together. It'll be easier. Lin Suisui could understand the feelings of these patients in front of her, so she didn't take it to heart. Instead, she explained to them sincerely. As for whether this plague can be cured, from the beginning of history until now, there have always been thousands of the plague in the area where we live. Over the years, doctors had also been summarizing their experiences and looking for more comprehensive methods to treat diseases from the experience accumulated by their predecessors. There had been a few the plague in the past few years, but because they were treated well, it didn't affect them that much. You've just gotten sick. Why do you have to be so depressed and give up? Lin Suisui's voice wasn't loud, but her words were convincing and easily dispelled much of their frustration. These patients' eyes lit up. Who knows if you came in willingly or if you were forced? Perhaps the adults have already abandoned us and are just waiting to trap us here to die. This woman's words were not groundless. It was recorded that when some dynasties dealt with the plague, they confined people who had the disease in a city and even destroyed the city to kill them to prevent future trouble. However, this method was too cruel and heartless. In the end, even if the plague could be appeased, the imperial court would be criticized. Moreover, this method often didn't work. If even a single person escaped from the plague area, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, until now, the imperial court had usually arranged for active treatment. They had to think of a way to cure it and destroy the disease. Not only could it benefit the people, but it could also ensure the support of the people. It could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. If he really gave up on you guys, with his personality, he could have directly executed you people who had contracted the disease and burned you down. Why would he go through so much trouble to set up a tent here to arrange for me to treat you guys? Besides, you're not even afraid of death anymore. What else do you have to worry about? Lin Suisui looked at the woman and asked with a smile. Besides, I'm not the only one who entered here this time. My husband also entered here with me. If this place is really beyond hope, how could I drag my husband in here to die with me? Seeing that the woman was silent, Lin Suisui smiled and added, we're already in the same boat now. We'll live and die together. Therefore, please believe me. This way, we can find a cure for you as soon as possible and leave this place as soon as possible. Lin Suisui continued to persuade her sincerely. This time, she finally convinced the woman to nod. All right, then I'll see how capable you are. She was the first to walk over. She sat in front of Lin Suisui according to Lin Suisui's instructions and reached out to let Lin Suisui take her pulse. She also let her check the rashes that were already starting to show on her arm. With this woman taking the lead, the remaining people in the tent chose to cooperate. Not only that, but the patients in the next tent also heard them. For the time being, they stopped making a fuss and listened to Lin Suisui's arrangements obediently. After checking all the patients in the plague area, Lin Suisui was more confident. When she came out and wanted to wash her hands, she was surprised to discover that there were 2 jars of hard liquor beside the bucket and wooden basin. She had previously told Pei Qian that strong alcohol helped prevent the spread of the plague and it was best for the soldiers who often moved around the plague area to cover their mouths with masks. They should also use strong alcohol to wash the exposed skin as much as possible. She didn't expect Pei Qian to prepare it for them. Since he had prepared it, Lin Suisui didn't stand on ceremony. After washing herself carefully, she watched Lu Zhe wash himself as well. Then, she returned to the ox cart to take out a pen and ink. She made a detailed record of the symptoms she had diagnosed today and didn't forget to include the prescription she had decided on. Pei Qian received the records and prescription from Lin Suisui almost immediately. What attracted him at first glance wasn't what was written on this paper, but the beautiful handwriting. How could a countryside girl have such beautiful handwriting? However, this handwriting was too different from the soft handwriting of the 6th daughter of the Lin family that he was familiar with. Prince, Madame Lu said that most of the herbs in this prescription can be found in the forest nearby, but 4 of them can't be found. I have to ask you to arrange for someone to buy them from the pharmacy in the nearby city as soon as possible. Qian He lowered his hand and reported in a low voice. At the same time, he didn't forget to ask, do we need to show this prescription to the doctors? Why show them? Pei Qian raised his hand and put away the pages. He only handed the prescription to Qian He. Transcribe a few copies of this prescription and ask them to go to the pharmacy in the nearby town quickly to buy the herbs we need. Chapter 44. Want to run? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 44. Want to run? Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. After Pei Qian instructed him, he lowered his eyes and looked at the medical report again. Then, he placed the report on the table at the side. However, just as he was about to arrange what to do next, Du Yuanrua knocked away the guard at the door and rushed in front of Pei Qian aggressively. Pei Qian, you bastard, you dare to trick me. Aren't you afraid that I'll make you suffer after I return to the capital? Actually, Du Yuanrua already knew a thing or two about the situation outside. His initial suspicion had already turned into certainty. However, it was also because he was convinced that there was indeed the plague in the refugee camp that he was so anxious. Originally, Du Yuanrua wanted to escape with his men. Unfortunately, after he left the tent, he realized that those trusted aides who had followed him had already been taken by Pei Qian and sent somewhere. He was alone now. He had no people or money. He couldn't even get a horse. How could he escape? Therefore, after thinking about it, he decided to look for Pei Qian. He had to leave right now. Otherwise, if the plague really spread, wouldn't he be dead meat? It didn't matter if Pei Qian was crazy, but he still wanted to live. He didn't want to stay here and die with this group of lowly commoners. Make me suffer. What do you plan to use to make me suffer? Pei Qian slowly put down the pen in his hand and looked up at Du Yuanrua, who was furious. With your intention of escaping, even if I chop you up now, no one in the capital will say anything against me. Besides, I'm only saving you and not harming you. Bullsh *T. If you want to accuse me, at least find a reasonable excuse. There's already the plague in the refugee camp. The plague. It's the plague. People will die. We might both die here. Do you understand?
I won't stop you if you want to die, but you can't keep me here to accompany you and those lowly commoners to die, right? Pei Qian, either you let me go today, or listen to what I said previously. Leave none of these refugees alive and execute them all. The corpses will be burned and the plague will be resolved. This matter happened too suddenly. Even if we go back and report it, His Majesty won't blame us. Why should we risk our lives? Du Yuanruo lost control of his emotions in the end. He glared at Pei Qian and roared until his voice became hoarse. Facing Du Yuanruo, who had completely lost control of his emotions, Pei Qian's attitude was as calm as before as he wrote something. Only when Du Yuanruo completely fell silent did he slowly say, "Are you done? Pei Qian, tell me. Are you going to let me go or not?" How could Du Yuanruo not see that Pei Qian was patronizing him? However, at this moment of life and death, he couldn't care less about these trivial details. He only wanted to run now. He didn't want to stay any longer. How can you guarantee that the current you and the people you want to bring out are not infected? If you get infected and bring them back to the capital, what do you think will happen to you? After putting down his pen, Pei Qian raised his head slightly and looked at the stunned Du Yuanruo with a smile. He continued to say, "Du Yuanruo, you're the son of the duke's wife after all. Why don't you have any brains?" He naturally wouldn't let Du Yuanruo go. This person was a coward, but he was still useful. Du Yuanruo wanted to continue shouting, but he was stopped by Qian He, who had come in after receiving the news. Du Yuanruo was tied up and dragged away before he could even shout. "Your Highness, the subordinates we sent to the nearby cities to report and ask for help have already returned." At first, when the officials of the two counties heard that we were escorting refugees, they were quite polite to us. But after hearing that there was the plague here, their expressions immediately changed. Not only did we fail to get what we needed, but two places even drove our people out of the city. After Qian He sent Du Yuanruo away, he turned around and quickly returned to the tent to report the latest news to Pei Qian. "Go, kidnap the families of the county officials in the nearby cities." Pei Qian put down the teacup in his hand. He wasn't surprised by this outcome, but he still couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. By choosing to protect themselves, they made a foolish decision. The medical officers were left behind in the refugee camp. In addition to helping take care of the refugees' health, they also had to teach people how to differentiate herbs. According to Lin Suisui's list, most of the herbs could indeed be found in the nearby forest. However, the problem was that there was a limited number of people now, so the task of finding herbs finally fell on the refugees in the refugee camp. In order to prevent people from escaping and causing trouble, Pei Qian also made arrangements. Those who went up the mountain to look for herbs were paid every day. However, only women could go up the mountain. A family could only allow one person to sign up. They would split into groups of 20 people and then go up the mountain under the protection of the soldiers. Women were more meticulous than men, so they were more suitable to go up the mountain to look for herbs. More importantly, women were generally timid, so their chances of escaping were relatively lower. Lin Suisui was actually relieved. Although the plague came suddenly this time, the illness actually wasn't serious. From the onset of the illness to the illness worsening and final death, it hadn't been a short time. Lin Suisui found out that the woman who had died previously was one of the people who had been punished. She was already very weak. Now that she had contracted the plague, it naturally made things worse. Now, the remaining patients in the plague area clearly looked a little better after drinking the medicine that had been brewed. This development was a good sign. After Lin Suisui finished writing down the medical records for the day, she was about to relax when she was attracted by a commotion at the entrance of the plague area. Curious, she turned to see a pair of sergeants pushing a dozen wailing men and women through the front door. Chapter 45. Pei Qian, you bastard, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 45. Pei Qian, you bastard translator. Henyi Translations Editor.
Henyi translations, what's, when Lin Suisui came forward, she was baffled to see the people lying on the ground. She looked up and asked the sergeant who had sent them over, what's going on? Not only had she never seen these people in the refugee camp, but from their attire, they also didn't look like ordinary refugees. Madam Lu, Mr. Pei arranged for them to help you. From today onwards, these people will be here to take care of the patient's daily needs, like changing their clothes and feeding them medicine. You just have to arrange for them to do things. If they disobey your orders, Mr. Pei will not let them off easily. The general in the lead cupped his fists at Lin Suisui and said Pei Qian's instructions respectfully and politely. Lin Suisui frowned as she looked at the group of people who were howling in despair on the ground. She really didn't know what work could be arranged for them. Even if there was work, could these people bear the responsibility? Madam Lu, don't worry. Mr. Pei said that our refugee camp won't raise useless people. If they can't do anything, it's better to just hang them up like the others. The general seemed to have noticed Lin Suisui's dilemma. He smiled and continued to raise his voice. Instead of saying it to Lin Suisui and the others, he said it to the pile of people lying on the ground. In the direction of his gaze, the corpses on the wooden shelves were still dripping blood. If you guys listen to Madame Lu's arrangements, you guys might not die. But if you guys continue to delay things here, the outcome won't be the same. The general smiled meaningfully and didn't delay any longer. He bowed to Lin Suisui again before turning to leave. Do any of you know how to sew? Since it was Pei Qian's arrangement, Lin Suisui didn't stand on ceremony with these people. She made arrangements. Although most of the people on the ground were terrified, they still understood the situation. Hearing Lin Suisui's question, two little girls quickly raised their hands weakly. With someone taking the lead, the girls on the other side also raised their hands. Go ask the soldier guarding the door for some thin cotton cloth and needles. Make masks and sleeves first. Next, I'll tell you what to pay attention to when taking care of those patients. If you can listen to my arrangements carefully and do as I say, I can guarantee your lives. But if you don't listen to my advice, there's nothing I can do. Lin Suisui didn't hide anything and decisively told the people in front of her some things that needed to be taken care of. Then, she arranged for a few men to fetch water and chop wood. In short, she followed Pei Qian's instructions and made sure that everyone who came in was busy. After arranging these people's work, Lin Suisui didn't stay idle either. She went to the tent to check all the patients. Compared to the first day, a few more patients had been sent in. Fortunately, the tent had been previously prepared and could accommodate them. However, there were clearly not enough people to take care of them. It was good to have this group of people to help. It was only after these people entered the plague area and helped for 2 days that Lin Suisui realized that the people sent in were actually the families of the nearby county officials. Because they were afraid of getting into trouble, these officials turned a deaf ear to Pei Qian's request for help. Not only did they not help, but they even chased out the soldiers who went to those towns to buy herbs and other resources. Pei Qian wasn't a pushover. He simply brought all the families of these officials into this refugee area. It was fine if they didn't help. At most, they would die together. As if this wasn't enough, on the third day, Lin Suisui actually saw the arrogant Du Yuanrua being sent in while tied up. Go, throw third young master Du into the tent where the seriously ill live. Pei Qian followed behind this group of people. Although his expression couldn't be seen because of the mask, the ruthlessness in his dark eyes made the officials who wanted to dissuade him swallow their words. They couldn't afford to offend him. Pei Qian, you son of a bitch, you'll die a horrible death. As Du Yuanrua struggled, the gag covering his mouth fell to the ground. He finally had the time to roar and curse. If possible, he would pounce on Pei Qian and bite him a few times to vent his anger. He originally thought that it was bad enough that Pei Qian imprisoned him in the tent, but he didn't expect this bastard to be so malicious as to make him contract a plague in order to threaten the surrounding officials into compromising and listening to his orders. Previously, Pei Qian put the word out that the only legitimate son of the Duke was currently suffering from the plague, so if the officials didn't help and something happened to him, these officials should think about how to appease the Duke. Why didn't he know that he had the plague? To think that he had foolishly asked Pei Qian. Who knew that this bastard would tell him in a sarcastic tone that he would know immediately? Then, he was sent to the plague area by this bastard. Don't worry, even if I die, I won't die in front of you. Pei Qian reached out and patted Du Yuanruo's face with a smile. For once, he wasn't angry at Du Yuanruo's cursing. Don't worry. Madame Lu's medical skills are outstanding. Even if you're infected with the plague, she has a way to treat you. Du Yuanruo opened his mouth to bite Pei Qian's finger, but Pei Qian dodged quickly. Not only did he fail to bite Pei Qian, but he also almost bit his tongue. Du Yuanruo had nowhere to vent his anger. When he heard Pei Qian's words, he couldn't help but roar, "She's just a village girl. What does she know about medicine? Pei Qian, you bastard, let me go if you have the guts. I want to fight you for 800 rounds. You. Save your strength." Du Yuanruo glanced at Du Yuanruo in disdain, then turned to instruct the soldiers guarding the side, "Block his mouth. He's so noisy." Then, without waiting for Du Yuanruo to be taken away, he turned around to look at Lin Suisui, who had come over after hearing the news. He said in front of Du Yuanruo, "Throw him into the tent of the seriously ill first. There's no need to prepare a mask for him. As for whether he will contract the plague, that's up to his luck. If he really contracts the plague, you don't have to worry about him. Third young Master Du is noble. You're just a doctor from the countryside. You're not qualified to treat this young master. Let him endure it." Chapter 46. Let him stay unconscious. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 46. Let him stay unconscious. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Du Yuanruo's resistance was futile. In the end, he was carried into the tent where the seriously ill patients lived. "Your Highness, the patient's condition is still stable. It's just that there are few of those rare herbs left." Lin Suisui wasn't interested in how to deal with Du Yuanruo. What she was concerned about was the treatment of the plague. They had to stock up on the herbs. Otherwise, all their previous efforts might be in vain. They also had to quickly arrange for the disinfected lime and liquor to be sent over. Otherwise, if the refugees in the refugee camp weren't disinfected thoroughly enough, this plague might not be able to end completely. "I've already made arrangements. Madame Lu, don't worry." Pei Qian glanced at Lin Suisui, then left with his men without saying anything. After sending off this group of people, Lin Suisui looked up at the sky, then turned to walk to the ox cart to look for Lu Zhe. These days, as long as she entered the tent, Lu Zhe would follow her closely. Only when she didn't have to enter the tent to interact with the patients anymore would Lu Zhe go rest. "You're tired, right?" Lin Suisui walked over and sat by the bonfire. Then, she turned to look at Lu Zhe apologetically. "I actually dragged you into this. That's not right." Lu Zhe poured a bowl of ginger soup and handed it to Lin Suisui. "I don't think this is a burden. Since you said that you're a doctor, it's your responsibility to treat illnesses and save people. Just like when I first entered the military camp, I also knew that it was the responsibility of the soldiers to guard the border. If you refuse to help, like those medical officers, then what's the difference between you and a sergeant escaping the battlefield? So I don't think there's anything wrong with your decision. If anything, it's really too unfair for you, as a woman, to have to bear this burden." Medical officers were with them. However, they didn't take any responsibility for this matter. They were really useless. "That's not a big deal. It's actually a gain to be able to figure out the treatment of an illness. Besides, this disease affects the entire refugee camp. Even if I want to escape, I can't. Lin Suisui actually understood this very well. They were all in the refugee camp now, so it was definitely impossible for her to only protect herself. It was obvious that Pei Qian wasn't easy to fool. The reason he still insisted on not giving up on these refugees was that things hadn't reached the point of no return. If things really got out of hand, he might really sacrifice all the refugees to control the spread of the plague. After all, these refugees weren't in the city, but in an environment like the wilderness. As long as these refugees were executed, this plague wouldn't cause more serious consequences. Therefore, in order to survive, she could only make this decision to save herself. Fortunately, the symptoms aren't severe this time. Lin Suisui paused. Thinking about how there was no one else here and that Lu Zhe didn't know medicine, she simply pulled him over and told him about her newfound knowledge. Lu Zhe sat at the side patiently as he dutifully listened. The two of them chatted for a while. When it was about time, Lin Suisui got up again and went into the tent to take the patients' pulses and check their conditions. It had to be said that Lin Suisui had discovered it in time. Although everyone was panicking when they first found out that the plague appeared in the refugee camp, after seeing that the illness had been controlled in the past few days, they gradually calmed down. After discovering that their conditions were improving after treatment, the patients who had already given up on survival became more proactive in cooperating with Lin Suisui's treatment. Everything was going well. However, when Lin Suisui went to the tent where the seriously ill lived, the situation inside made her frown. It was also at this moment that Lin Suisui really felt that it was no wonder Pei Qian wanted to torture Du Yuanruo. It was really because this person was too annoying. Looking at the situation in the tent, she wanted Lu Zhe to carry Du Yuanruo, who was still rolling in the middle of the tent, away first. However, just as she turned around, she saw Lu Zhe walk past her to Du Yuanruo's side. Before Du Yuanruo could resist, Lu Zhe had already picked up the rope that bound Du Yuanruo and threw him onto the pile of dirty bedding that had just been changed. The blanket was stained with pus from the patient's festering wounds. No matter how ignorant Du Yuanruo was of medicine, he knew what it meant for him to come into contact with these pus. He could no longer hold it in and fainted. With this big problem resolved, the rest went much smoother. Lin Suisui first comforted the patients and took their pulses. Then, she stood up and left. When she came out, she didn't forget to arrange for someone to go in and help clean up the tent. As for the unconscious Du Yuanruo, he should just stay unconscious for now. With Lin Suisui's care, the few patients in the plague area quickly recovered and could leave. This was originally a good thing, but to Lin Suisui's surprise, her arrangement was strongly opposed by the medical officers. They didn't agree. These patients had been confirmed to have recovered by Lin Suisui, but who could be sure that these people had really recovered? This is a serious matter. They were released just because Madame Lu said that they had recovered. What if they get reinfected? The doctor in the lead bowed to Pei Qian respectfully before saying confidently, so just in case, it's best if these people stay in the plague area first. Then according to you, Dr. Tang, how long are these people going to stay inside? Are they going to stay until eternity? Pei Qian raised his eyebrows. He was actually a little surprised by these medical officers' reaction. They had been quite obedient these past few days, so he thought that they had given up the desire to go against orders, but he didn't expect them to be waiting for this moment. Dr. Tang, when the plague happened previously, you guys hid faster than anyone else. Now that the patients have recovered, you guys are causing quite a lot of trouble. Why? Do you think that now that there's a way to treat this disease, you can come out and fight for credit? Do you think I'm stupid or blind? Chapter 47. My wife only treats people. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 47. My wife only treats people. She doesn't listen to dogs. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Dr. Tang did not expect Pei Qian to not show them any respect and directly expose their little scheme. If it were anyone else, he might have the courage to explain, but the person he was facing now was Pei Qian. This person treated human lives like dirt. With a thud, Dr. Tang knelt in front of Pei Qian while trembling. He did not dare to say anything. He only kowtowed and apologized. They really did want to fight for credit. This was a political achievement that could bring them great benefits. If they could get credit for it, it would be very beneficial to their future. Moreover, in their opinion, Madame Lu was just a village girl who had some medical skills. She had no power or influence. As long as they used some tricks, they would definitely get it done. Unfortunately, the person in charge this time was Pei Qian, who had never acted according to common sense. I know your plan. You think that Madame Lu is just an ordinary village woman who has no power or influence, so you can snatch her credit. Without anyone knowing, you can accumulate enough merits for yourself to rise up through the ranks. You don't have to enter the plague area to take care of the patients, nor do you have to worry about the prescription, as long as you can take credit. Shame on all of you. After saying this, Pei Qian paused and glanced at Dr. Tang, who was kneeling on the ground. Just as Dr. Tang felt that he was done for, he heard Pei Qian, who had already walked to his side, say, however, it's not impossible for me to understand why you guys have such thoughts. As the saying goes, men strive for success. If you want to get promoted and become rich, I won't stop you. After all, we have gone through so much together. Madame Lu, a country girl, indeed doesn't need such credit. However, she was the one who discovered the plague after all. She was the one who entered the plague area to treat the patients. In the end, she was the one who found the prescription and cured the patients. It doesn't seem appropriate for you to take credit for her deeds while contributing nothing, does it? They originally thought that they were definitely screwed at this point, but they did not expect such a turnaround. Dr. Tang quickly looked up at Pei Qian expectantly and probed, then, what do you mean? Since you want the credit, shouldn't you give up some of the rewards? Pei Qian's tone was very calm, but Dr. Tang, who was kneeling on the ground, did not have the courage to say no. 5,000 taels each. You also know that if everything goes smoothly on this trip, you will naturally be rewarded when you return to the capital. It's only 5,000 taels of silver. I believe the four of you are not stingy. But I didn't bring so much silver with me when I left the capital. Dr. Tang heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that they just had to pay 5,000 taels of silver per person. Although this was not a small sum, as Pei Qian had said, it was not impossible for a family like theirs to gather this bit of money. However, where could he get the money from now? That's easy. I have it. If you want this credit, come and sign the IOU, so after returning to the capital, I won't have to be afraid of you reneging on your debt. As Pei Qian spoke, he had already walked back to the table and threw the 4 IOUs he had been writing in front of Dr. Tang. Take them. Go back and discuss it with your colleagues. If you agree, sign and send this IOU back. Then, I'll take it that you agree. If you're unwilling, I won't force you. However, don't try to take credit. After we go back, I'll report everything that happened here. At that time, you'll probably be charged with desertion and dereliction of duty. At most, you'll be fired. Worst case scenario, you might be executed. It would have been better if Pei Qian did not mention it. At the mention of it, Dr. Tang did not dare to delay any longer. He kowtowed and rushed out. Not long after, he bent down and respectfully handed the 4 IOUs to Pei Qian. With enough herbs, the remaining patients recovered one after another. In the end, only the 3 patients with the most serious illnesses were still recovering. Du Yuanrua, who had been forced in by Pei Qian previously, had no desire to run even if he was not tied up. Because he had been completely subdued. This was because Lu Zhe had thrown him towards those contaminated blankets. He was not lucky enough and really got infected. At first, Lin Suisui wanted to treat him, but just as Pei Qian had said previously, third young Master Du had a noble status. How could he be willing to let her get close to him? He kept clamoring for an imperial physician. How could there be an imperial physician in the wilderness? Those medical officers were afraid of death and did not dare to approach, so in the end, his illness worsened. He was delirious from the fever. If not for the fact that he had been discovered in time the next morning and forced to drink medicine, he would have lost his life. With this lesson, this young master became completely obedient. However, being obedient did not stop him from complaining. Why doesn't Madame Lu take my pulse? If she doesn't take my pulse, how can she give me the right prescription? Ever since Du Yuanrua could walk, he immediately staggered out of the tent to look for Lin Suisui. However, as soon as he came out, he was blocked by Lu Zhe. Of course, he was dissatisfied and shouted at Lu Zhe angrily. My wife only treats people and doesn't listen to dogs. Young master, you're a noble person and don't think highly of my wife's medical skills. Don't let yourself suffer. Lu Zhe looked coldly at Du Yuanrua, who looked much weaker than usual because of his high fever. He did not intend to let him harass Lin Suisui at all. Getting Lin Suisui to take his pulse would really dirty his wife's hands. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by only treating people? How dare you call me a dog? Du Yuanrua finally realized what was going on. He was so angry that he almost fainted on the spot. He panted heavily as he pointed at Lu Zhe with trembling fingers. Just you wait. I'll kill you now. Ah! Before Du Yuanrua could finish speaking, he was pricked by Lu Zhe's finger and fell to the ground. He immediately screamed in pain. Chapter 48. A Windfall. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 48. A Windfall. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Du Yuanrua's scream didn't gain anyone's sympathy. Instead, it attracted Pei Qian, who had always been at odds with him. As Pei Qian circled Du Yuanrua with interest, Du Yuanrua felt a chill run down his spine. He shrank back and stared at Pei Qian in fear. What do you want? When he saw Pei Qian, he subconsciously wanted to run. He felt that Pei Qian was simply too evil. I'm thinking about something. Rubbing his chin, Pei Qian sized up Du Yuanrua again before continuing, almost all the patients in the plague area have recovered. Only you, third young Master Du, are still hanging around. Madame Lu's status isn't high enough. No matter what, she could not treat your precious body, right? Therefore, I wondered if I should think of a way to send you back to the capital and ask the imperial physicians to treat you. But it's a long journey. I'm really worried you won't be able to hold on. Pei Qian, stop using dirty tricks. Let me tell you, if you continue to scheme against me, I'll definitely think of a way to skin you when I return to the capital. His intuition told him that he definitely would not have a good ending if he provoked Pei Qian now, but he could not stop talking back. Actually, there's a way to help young Master Du recover quickly. As Lin Suisui stood at the side, she lowered her eyes slightly as she said in a low voice, some people's skin will first develop red sores before swelling with rashes. The way to remedy this is to mix herbs into medicine and apply it to the area. Usually, there would be an unbearable itch when these sores acted up. After one scratched the skin, the sores would become infected, which triggered fevers. Therefore, if we can use a medicinal bath to treat it, this area will recover much faster. Are there enough herbs? Pei Qian nodded and turned to ask Qian He. Qian He hurriedly nodded and replied, Master, there are still a lot of herbs left. The patients in the refugee camp have basically recovered. Only the few who were seriously ill previously are left. Madame Lu also said that they have actually recovered, but their bodies are still a little weak and they need to recuperate. In other words, the only one who hasn't recovered is third young master Du. Pei Qian turned around with a smile and looked at the terrified Du Yuanruo with sparkling eyes. Don't worry, third young master. I've known you for so long. I definitely won't abandon you. We have enough herbs on hand now. Don't worry. For the sake of your health, I definitely won't feel that it's a pity to use these herbs on you. Pei Qian, what trick do you have up your sleeve? Du Yuanruo subconsciously wanted to run, but Pei Qian's men were everywhere. Even if he wanted to run, he had nowhere to run. He could only continue to roar angrily and struggle, but it was still useless. He was tied up again. After Du Yuan was taken away, Pei Qian took the initiative to say to Lin Suisui, "We've been delayed here for a long time. We have to hurry. The officials from the nearest city have already sent a few ox carts to transport the patients who still need to recuperate." As he spoke about his next arrangements, Pei Qian raised his hand and took out a wooden box from his sleeve. He handed it to Lin Suisui. There are 20,000 taels of silver inside. I gave the credit for you saving people's lives to the 4 accompanying medical officers. Since they got your credit, I naturally have to give this reward to you. Of course, if you think my arrangement isn't to your liking, you can refuse. I'll report it to His Majesty to seek credit for you, but, I agree with your arrangements, Your Highness. Lin Suisui accepted Pei Qian's arrangements without thinking. She and Lu Zhe were fugitives now. It wasn't easy for them to escape from the capital. How could they return? She had chosen to announce the plague in order to protect herself. Now that she had obtained such a huge sum of money, what else was there to be dissatisfied about? Although getting credit sounded nice, she was just a village girl with no power or influence. Even if His Majesty could reward her, what would he reward her with? It was better to accept the money in her hand. In that case, get ready. We'll continue to set off tomorrow morning. Pei Qian glanced at the jade bead necklace around Lin Suisui's neck and nodded slightly. Then, he turned around and left with Qian He and the others. Because they had already confirmed that they would set off tomorrow morning, Lin Suisui and Lu Zhe didn't continue to stay in the quarantine area. Instead, they packed their things and returned to their previous spot. Seeing that it was still early, Lu Zhe even took the time to enter the mountain and hunt a rabbit for the 2 of them before the sky darkened. During this period of time, they had been trapped in the plague area. Although Pei Qian hadn't mistreated them in terms of food, the rabbit meat they roasted themselves tastes better. Actually, Little White had been the most aggrieved during this period of time. In order not to expose Little White's existence, Little White could only hide in the carriage pitifully during this period of time. Only at night, when it was quiet, did Lu Zhe let it out to take a breather in the field around the carriage. The dried meat they had accumulated along the way had all been eaten by Little White during this period of time. Therefore, when Lu Zhe brought Little White into the mountain this time, it was overjoyed. If not for Lu Zhe's urging, it probably would not have wanted to come back. It has already eaten in the mountains. Lu Zhe flipped the rabbit in his hand. After seeing Lin Suisui come out of the carriage, he stopped her from cooking meat soup for Little White. We hunted 2 rabbits. Little White only came back after eating 1. No wonder Little White fell asleep as soon as it came back. Lin Suisui couldn't help but laugh. She sat beside Lu Zhe and lowered her voice to tell Lu Zhe about the money Pei Qian had given her today. I was just taking advantage of the situation. I didn't expect to have such an unexpected windfall. With this money, we don't have to worry after settling down in the north. With this sum of money, if they were just an ordinary family, they would definitely be able to build a house and buy a shop in the north. Also, when the time comes, I should have enough money to prepare medicine for you. Lin Suisui carefully took out the roll of banknotes from her sleeve and handed them to Lu Zhe without hesitation. Safe keep them. It's not safe to leave them with me. Chapter 49. I'll only have the strength to be. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 49. I'll only have the strength to be angry after eating. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations, aren't you afraid I'll run away with the money? Lu Zhe didn't expect Lin Suisui to trust him so much. He wasn't in a hurry to reach out to take it. Instead, he started a joke with Lin Suisui. Who are you? Do you care about this bit of money? Lin Suisui chuckled. She didn't care about this at all. Or rather, she was completely confident that he didn't care about this sum of money. Besides, it's just a matter of money. Are you worried that I won't be able to earn it back? Lu Zhe was about to speak when he heard footsteps beside the carriage. He quickly put the roll of banknotes into his sleeve and turned around to see Du Miaoer, whom he had seen once or twice before, walking out from behind the carriage with a bamboo basket. Mr. Gu, Madame Lu, I heard that you finally returned from the plague area, so I specifically brought you some persimmons. Du Miaoer bowed and smiled politely at Lin Suisui and Lu Zhe before handing over the basket in her hand. Just as she had said, there was indeed half a basket of persimmons in this basket. During this period of time, they had many opportunities to go up the mountain. Because of the soldiers accompanying them, they had the courage to enter the depths of the forest. There were not only wild persimmons, but also many wild dates, mountain peaches, and chestnuts. However, there were not many pecans to begin with. In addition, her stepmother liked them, so in the end, the only thing she could use as a gift was this persimmon cake that looked good but was actually a little bitter. Thank you, Miss Miaoer, but we can't accept this persimmon cake. Lin Suisui returned a polite smile, but she didn't reach out to take the bamboo basket Du Miaoer handed over. It's not easy for anyone now. It's definitely not easy for your family to obtain this basket of persimmons. We appreciate your kindness, but we really can't accept this. Please take it back. Lin Suisui's rejection was quite straightforward. Not only did she take Du Miaoer's pride into consideration, but she also gave a reasonable excuse to reject her goodwill. If Du Miaoer had any common sense, she would have left. However, Du Miaoer clearly had no intention of returning home just like that. She had probably already expected Lin Suisui to reject her, so she didn't think too much about it and directly rejected Lin Suisui. Madame Lu, you saved my life previously. Before I could thank you, the plague happened. It wasn't easy for me to wait for you to come back. This is just a mountain fruit that my sister and I went up the mountain to pick. We can only express our gratitude this way. If you don't accept it, I really don't know what to do. Du Miaoer clearly wanted to use Lin Suisui's treatment as an excuse. However, she couldn't find an excuse to refute her. Miss Miaoer, you really don't have to do this. I've told you before that treating illnesses and saving people is just what I should do as a doctor. When I treated you back then, Mrs. Luo paid the consultation fee. If you really want to thank someone, you should thank Mrs. Luo. Lin Suisui's tone became gentler. She naturally saw that from the moment Du Miaoer came over, she had been glancing at Lu Zhe. It was obvious what she was thinking. She didn't want to interfere in Lu Zhe's private matters, but she was still Lu Zhe's wife in front of everyone now. Du Miaoer was flirting with her husband in front of her. Who could tolerate this? Perhaps, Miss Miaoer actually wants to thank my husband more. Lin Suisui didn't want to indulge her, so she stopped smiling. She crossed her arms and looked at Du Miaoer unhappily. Dnov you don't have to be in a hurry to deny it. I know that you wanted to get close to my husband a few times, but in the end, you didn't get the chance to develop things further. Therefore, you targeted Mrs. Luo, who was more soft-hearted and easy to talk to. You asked your sister to secretly pour out the herbs that Mrs. Luo had brewed for you to ward off the cold a few times, causing your fever to not subside. You then wanted to collude with your stepmother and hire someone to pretend to be a doctor to blackmail Mrs. Luo and her family. I couldn't stand it, so I went over to take your pulse and treat you. If I wasn't worried that you would continue to pretend to be sick and cause trouble for Mrs. Luo, do you think I would help you for no reason? Besides, I think what I said to your sister the other day was clear enough. As long as you still have some dignity, you shouldn't continue to carry out your evil plans. Du Miaoer was completely dumbfounded. When she came over, she had thought of countless possibilities, but she didn't expect Lin Suisui to expose everything. No matter how thick-skinned she was, she could not stay any longer. She gritted her teeth, turned around, covered her eyes, and ran away. I'm tired. I'm going to bed now. After sending Du Miaoer away, Lin Suisui was still a little angry. Actually, she didn't understand where this dissatisfaction came from. Even if Du Miaoer liked Lu Zhe, they shouldn't have told others that they were husband and wife back then. Explaining that they were siblings would save them a lot of trouble. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Lin Suisui stood up to return to the ox cart. Unexpectedly, before she could stand up completely, Lu Zhe, who was beside her, reached out and grabbed her arm, pulling her back to her previous seat. You haven't eaten yet. You'll be hungry again in the middle of the night and won't be able to sleep. As Lu Zhe spoke, he handed over a roasted rabbit leg. It smelled delicious and immediately aroused Lin Suisui's desire. She subconsciously swallowed, but she was still thinking about how she had wanted to return to the carriage previously. If she immediately changed her mind and started to eat the rabbit leg, wouldn't that be embarrassing? Eat. You'll only have the strength to be angry after eating. Lu Zhe handed the rabbit leg to Lin Suisui again. His tone became gentler and more coaxing. Lin Suisui couldn't help but laugh. Then, she turned around and glared at Lu Zhe angrily. As she snatched the rabbit leg, she didn't forget to complain angrily, "It's all your fault. Even in such a situation, you still can't suppress your ability to attract women." Chapter 50. Madame Lu is also stupid. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 50. Madame Lu is also stupid. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Lu Zhe was slightly stunned. He didn't expect to hear such a complaint from Lin Suisui. He couldn't help but laugh. No. She probably didn't choose me because she was interested in me. I guess I'm less attractive to her than our ox cart. How can you talk like that? Lin Suisui didn't expect Lu Zhe to say such self-deprecating words. She couldn't help but laugh. However, don't men like women like her? When she was still a doctor, she had often seen wives being outwitted by these seemingly fragile girls. There were even a few times when the evidence that the mistress had poisoned and harmed the wife was conclusive. However, it was unknown what had possessed the monarch, but he always insisted that it was a misunderstanding. He didn't believe that his fragile and kind-hearted mistress would do such a vicious thing. I'm probably different from those people. Lu Zhe turned to look at the little girl, who kept glancing at him with sparkling eyes but pretended to be calm as she nibbled on the rabbit leg to hide it. He thought for a moment and said seriously, I admire women who stab people with golden hairpins twice without successfully stabbing people to death. Pfft. Cough, cough, cough. Lin Suisui didn't expect Lu Zhe to say this. She almost choked. Looking at her miserable appearance as she coughed, Lu Zhe couldn't be bothered to joke with her anymore. He quickly put down the half-eaten rabbit meat in his hand and patted her back to calm her down as he said helplessly, all right. Let's not talk when eating next time. Lin Suisui was so angry that her eyes turned red. She turned around and glared at him with what she thought was the fiercest gaze. If not for his shocking words just now, would she have choked so badly? Little did Lin Suisui know that she actually looked harmless in Lu Zhe's eyes. She looked like a flustered rabbit. She was so cute that he couldn't help but want to reach out and pinch her cheeks. Yes, perhaps it should be said that she looked like a squirrel with bulging cheeks. At dinner, the atmosphere in the Du family wasn't so relaxed. Although Du Miaoer had tried her best to hide it, when she returned, her eyes were clearly red and she looked disheveled. Her family knew the outcome of her trip without even guessing. Before Du Wangshe could speak, Du Ling'er, who had always been at odds with her, couldn't help but mock her. Even though she was mocked, Du Miaoer could only lower her head and swallow her tears. Du Ling'er was Du Wangshe's daughter. If she dared to do anything to Du Ling'er, the Du family would probably immediately come over and teach her a lesson. For now, she could only endure it. Why? Does Gu Erlang not like you? During the meal, Du Wangshe naturally didn't hide it and threw a tantrum in front of the entire family. She was already vulgar to begin with. Now that she had an excuse, she didn't hide her disgust for her two stepdaughters and criticized them sarcastically. As the saying goes, hard work pays off. If it doesn't work the first time, do it twice. You'll definitely find a way. Du Miaoer looked up. After thinking for a while, she calmed down. If she had only treated Gu Erlang as a backup in the past, then everything she had seen and encountered today was enough to make her determined to get this man. How can you say such things? Aren't you being shameless? Du Wangshe originally thought that her sarcastic words would make the girl in front of her accept her fate and obediently agree to her arrangement to marry that butcher in exchange for money. She didn't expect her usually meek stepdaughter to say such shocking words. That's because you don't know what I saw when I went over today. I saw the banknotes in Gu Erlang's hand. That stack should have at least a few thousand taels. Du Miaoer's knuckles that were holding the chopsticks turned pale because she was holding them too tightly. Of course, she understood that it was very risky to expose all of this to the Du family, but she was too weak now. She had to get Du Wangshe's help and cooperation. What did you say? When Du Wangshe heard this, she immediately perked up. It wasn't only the Du family. The Du family members, who were originally focused on eating and pretending to be invisible, also looked up at Du Miaoer like wolves that had seen raw meat. A few thousand taels of silver. If these silver could be theirs. I said that Gu Erlang has at least a few thousand taels of silver in his hands. Du Miaoer looked up and calmly met the eager gazes of her family. She replied with certainty, I vaguely heard that this sum of silver was rewarded by Mr. Pei because Madame Lu helped to deal with the plague this time. Mr. Pei is very generous. If it's really him who gave it to them, a few thousand taels of silver might be too little. Before Du Wangshe could say anything, who was sitting on her left, couldn't help but interrupt excitedly. Who knows, when they reach the base, he might reward Gu Erlang with an assignment or something. If Miaoer can really marry him, won't our family have a much better life in the future? But isn't the person dealing with the plague Madame Lu? What does this have to do with Gu Erlang? Du Ling'er snorted and said disdainfully, Gu Erlang is a coward who only knows how to rely on his wife. Ling'er, shut up. Du Wangshe turned around and scolded Du Ling'er. Then, she turned to look at Du Miaoer. Although your sister's words are unpleasant, it's the truth. Everyone knows that the person who knows medicine is Madame Lu. The Gu Erlang you like has done nothing but follow his wife around every day. Where did he get the money? Of course it was given to him by Madame Lu. I saw it with my own eyes. Madame Lu didn't leave any of the banknotes behind. She handed them all to Gu Erlang. Du Miaoer thought of the scene she had just seen behind the carriage and couldn't help but feel tempted. She also couldn't help but feel that Lin Suisui was stupid. If it were her, she would have kept the large sum of money for herself. Unlike Lin Suisui, who actually handed it all to Gu Erlang without any hesitation.